In the years of the primal course, in the dawn of terrestrial birth, man mastered the mammoth and horse, and man was the lord of the earth. He made him in hollow skin from the heart of an holy tree. He compassed the earth therein, and man was the lord of the sea. He controlled the vigor of steam, he harnessed the lightning for hire. He drove the celestial team, and man was the lord of the fire. Deep-mouthed from their thrones deep-seated, the choirs of the Aeons declared, the last of the demons defeated. For man is the lord of the air. Arise, O man, in thy strength, the kingdom is thine to inherit, till the high gods witness at length that man is the lord of his spirit. Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. 93, and welcome. Today I'd like to discuss an important symbol in the occult world. This is the pentagram. It's used and has been used by many different cultures, mystery schools, and religions. Today it's used by pagans, Satanists, Thelemites, and other occult traditions alike, including the Golden Dawn and many other mystery schools and lineages. It was even used by ancient Jews and Christians. So I'd like to do a little history of the possible origins of this symbol, and then get into the properties of the symbol itself, and why it's such a profound emblem of mysticism to so many people. Firstly, the oldest reference to the meaning of the pentagram that I could dig up points all the way back to ancient Babylon and Sumer. We know that the ancient Mesopotamians understood astrology and were quite fond of studying the heavens. The pentagram then can be associated with the planet Venus. Because of the differences in the orbits of Venus and Earth around the Sun, it appears that Venus paints a perfect pentagram for us. Venus orbits the Sun in 224.7 Earth days, or 0.615 Earth years. Therefore, Venus orbits the Sun 2.6 times for Earth's 1.6 times. This is called the Earth-Venus synodic cycle, a synod, of course, being a place of meeting. This is also called the Earth-Venus transit, and happens in pairs, each event in the pair occurring approximately 8 years apart. Each pair in the cycle is spaced approximately 120 years apart. During this time, the planet Venus can be seen as a dot crossing the Sun, much like a lunar eclipse. Of course, because Venus is so far away and the Sun is so big, it appears as just a dot, rather than completely blotting out the Sun like the Moon would. A pentagram can then be drawn within the orbits of these planets using their synodic points as a single point on the pentagram. We are currently experiencing an Earth-Venus transit, and the first occurrence in the pair happened on June 8, 2004. The next one will occur on June 6, 2012. The last pair that happened before this occurred 129 years ago, in 1874 and 1882. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, unless you plan on living another 130 years. So I suggest everyone who can witness this on July 6th of this year do so. This phenomenon, to me, explains the modern connection that the symbol of the pentagram has with Lucifer, since the most common theory, as Lucifer being the morning star, is that this myth is an allegory for the planet Venus, which rises before the sun and is therefore the morning star, heralding in the light of day. The Freemasons today use the symbol to signify their Order of the Eastern Star, depicted here. The modern Freemasons refer to it as, and I quote from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, "The Freemasons of the United States have by tacit consent referred to it, the pentagram, as a symbol of the 5 points of fellowship. The outline of the 5-pointed star are the same as those of the pentalpha of Pythagoras." This leads me to my next significant point in history I'd like to cover after Babylon, which is going to take us to ancient Greece. Pythagoras, one of the greatest philosophers and mathematicians in all of recorded history, was extremely fond of this symbol for many different reasons. First of these I'd like to talk about is the ratio known as the golden mean, or phi. This ratio can be found nearly everywhere in nature. It's also quite apparent in the construction of the pentagram itself, as demonstrated in this image. As we can see by this rather simplified diagram, the length of the red side divided by the green is equal to the ratio of the green divided by the blue, as well as the blue divided by the purple. This ratio is known as phi. It has also been called the Fibonacci sequence, which, much like pi, is a seemingly infinite number. This pattern can be graphed as a spiral, since it grows numerically at an exponential rate, the likes of which can be found elsewhere in nature, right from the lowliest seashell to global air currents. Da Vinci demonstrated this ratio with his Vitruvian Man, seen here. Not only does this symbol show clearly a pentagram outlining the human form, but it also shows that the golden ratio can be applied to the human form. One example is the distance from the fingertips to the shoulder, when compared to the distance from the elbow, shows the same ratio. I'm sure there are many other points in the human body that demonstrate this as well. As I've said, this ratio can be found practically everywhere in nature. Because of this, as well as other considerations, Pythagoras saw this as a symbol of mathematical perfection. 5 was not only a significant number to Pythagoras for this reason, but also because he believed that the universe could be divided into 5 basic geometric shapes. He also connected these forms with the 5 elements of nature, which he believed comprised the universe, these being the tetrahedron, or 4-sided shape, representing the element of fire, the cube, or 6-sided shape, representing earth, the octahedron, or 8-sided shape, representing air, the dodecahedron, or 12-sided shape, representing the aether, or idea, as well as the icosahedron, the 20-sided shape, representing the element of water. Pythagoreans also saw the symbol as being that of an amulet of good health and well-being. This can be demonstrated by assigning the Greek words to the elements as follows. Hudor, being water, Gaia, earth, idea, the world of aether, Hel, representing the sun's warmth, so I guess fire, and air, representing air. By taking the first letters of all of these words and placing them together, we come up with the word Hugeia, which means cleanliness and sanitation in Greek. The goddess Hygeia was the goddess of health and was the daughter of the god Asclepius, the god of medicine. This is likely why the Pythagoreans recognized this symbol as an emblem of good health and well-being. Hygeia is also the root of our English word hygiene, which represents cleanliness and well-being. I'd also like to talk about the significance of the pentagram and the sacred sites around the world. Firstly, the 3 angles we need to take into consideration are 36 degrees, 72 degrees, and 108 degrees, which are all just 36 added to itself again and again. 36 times 1 being 36, 36 times 2 being 72, and 36 times 3 being 108. Also, there are sacred sites around the world that correspond to these numbers. The Great Pyramid is 10,055 miles from the southern volcano of Easter Island. Both these points in relation to the ancient Anangula sites in Alaska draw a triangle where the 2 bottom points are 36 degrees and the upper point is 108 degrees. Also, in Angkor Wat in Cambodia, there are 72 major ancient monuments. There are 108 figures that surround the Angkor Thom. as well as 72 Buddhas in the latticework here. This site is also drawn in relationship with the site in Alaska I previously spoke of and the ziggurat of creating a triangle where the two base points are 72 degrees and the top point is 36 degrees. It's interesting to note that the metric system was created by dividing the distance from the North Pole to the equator by 10,000, which gave us the length of a kilometer. The distance between and Angkor is 6,180 kilometers, the exact decimal for pi being 1.618, 6,180. Which kind of makes me wonder if the ancients that first built these sites had a similar system of measurement to our metric system. They likely knew the distance from the North Pole to the equator, and possibly knew the size of the planet itself. As we know, most of these famous ancient sites that exist all over the world were arranged to the equinoxes and solstices, as well as cardinal points and even constellations. One factoid I found really interesting was the distance between the Great Pyramid and Angkor Wat is 20% of the Earth's circumference. Interesting. Also, the distance from Angkor Wat to Anatom Island near Australia is 20% of the Earth's circumference. The same from Anatom Island to Easter Island. But the distance from Easter Island back to the Great Pyramids is 40% of the Earth's circumference. So, if you were to cut the Earth in half like an orange, these 4 points would form 4 of the 5 points in a pentagram. The fifth then being halfway between Giza and Easter Island, somewhere in the North Atlantic Ocean. Makes me think back to Greek mythology, where they spoke of Atlantis existing somewhere far beyond the Pillars of Hercules. We call the Pillars of Hercules today the Strait of Gibraltar between Spain and Morocco. Therefore, the best place to look for Atlantis should be approximately 4 degrees 19 north latitude and 41 degrees 30 west longitude. Interestingly enough, there are ancient maps that put a large island roughly in that position. Since I created this video as a spin-off from my previous video on Baphomet, I'd now like to insert Levy's perception of the pentagram from A.E. Waite's translation of Transcendental Magic. Chapter 5, The Blazing Pentagram. The pentagram, which in Gnostic schools is called the blazing star, is the sign of intellectual omnipotence and autocracy. It is the star of the Magi. It is the sign of the Word made flesh. And according to the direction of its points, this absolute magical symbol represents order or confusion. The divine lamb of Hormaz and St. John, or the accursed goat of Mendes. It is initiation or profanation. It is Lucifer or Vesper, the star of morning or evening. It is Mary or Lilith, victory or death, day or night. The pentagram with 2 points in its ascendant represents Satan as the goat of the Sabbath, when 1 point in the ascendant is the sign of the Savior. By placing it in such a manner that the 2 points are in the ascendant and 1 is below, we may see the horns, ears, and beard of the hierarchic goat of Mendes, when it becomes the sign of infernal evocations. I've spoken much in my last video about the connection of the pentagram with the goat of Mendes, or Baphomet, and that symbol's significance itself. In the passage I just read, Levy also refers to it as the Savior. I think it's appropriate now to talk about the pentagram's connection with Judeo-Christian tradition, and why the pentagram was used to represent Jesus in Gnostic times. I've spoken already about Pythagoras, and how he attributed the 5 elements to the pentagram, but those same 5 elements have been attributed to this symbol since, and throughout many mystery schools that have descended since Pythagoras' school. as shown here, the appropriate colors being red for fire, yellow for air, blue for water, and green for earth. What Pythagoras called the aether, or idea, is more commonly being referred to today as spirit, which is being represented here by white. These four lower elements, or earthly elements, are parallel with the four Kabbalistic worlds, Absolute, Bariah, Yetzirah, and Asaya, and can therefore be attributed to the four letters of the unpronounceable name of God, known as the Tetragrammaton, or the four-letter word, which are Yod, He, Vav, He. This is properly transliterated to English as YHVH. It has also been transliterated as JHVH and YHWH. The Yod represents fire. The first He is water, the Vav, air, the second He, earth. The Hebrew characters that represents the spirit is Shin. When placed on the pentagram, if you were to read around the diagram counterclockwise, starting at Yod, not coincidentally the first Hebrew character from which all other Hebrew characters are derived, you can then read out the name Yod, He, Shin, Vav, He, or Yeshua, which is the root of the Hebrew name Joshua. It is also fabled that the name Jesus is in fact a Greek version of the Hebrew name Joshua, and therefore Yeshua can be seen as the mystical Christ. This new word, Yeshua, is known as the Pentagrammaton. So by most of the evidence here, we can see how the pentagram has been used to represent man himself, as well as man within his universe and the universe itself, as well as God within man and man's connection with God. I'd like to finish then with a little revelation I had as a result of something my friend Jeremy said to me in response to my first video in this series, when I was discussing the astrological ages and how the sun shifts 1 degree along the ecliptic every 72 years or so. Jeremy had pointed out to me that 72 degrees is one of the angles in the pentagram, as well as the average human lifespan. This made me contemplate that since the three angles that comprise the pentagram are 36, 72, and 108, and I had heard that there are Qigong masters and such that have shown the potential human lifespan to be somewhere more in the ballpark of 120, if cared for properly. If the pentagram is a symbol of man, and we attribute these letters to the human lifespan, I can very much see that the midlife is approximately 35 to 40, the average lifespan is approximately 70 to 80, and those that live healthy lives live well into their hundreds. I see articles in the paper all the time, as an example, a lady who's celebrating her 103rd birthday. If I'm correct on my facts here, the oldest living man documented today that is still alive is Shiroyuman Kimura of Western Japan, who is 114 years old. Damn. So perhaps 36 year, 72 year, and 108 year marks are milestones to be achieved within the human lifespan, or at least they're a natural guideline that has already been built into our physiology. The great thing about the pentagram is that it seems the more you research it, the more you find. It has no ending. But that's all I have time for today. So I hope it was educational. Blessed be in 93. Love is the law. Love under love.